Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Katia and Jordan from Decoland, and today we are here to present you the multidimensional impact measurement framework. We are part of the Funding the Commons and Earth Commons hackathon, and we are sponsoring the track there on impact evaluation and building for the digital public goods infrastructure. So check it out. We had a workshop on multidimensional impact measurement framework before, and so we are recording this presentation just to give you a better overview of what it is. Also, we had some connectivity issues, so we think it's just going to give you a better idea of what it is that we are building, why, what is the need for the ecosystem, and also how can you participate in the hackathon and contribute to building this tool. So before I start with the overview, I just want to give a couple of words about ourselves, who we are. So we are co-founders of Decoland, and Decoland works to democratize funding for social impact. We really believe that technology can be the driving force to advance social justice, equity, and inclusion. But we also believe that the principles of social justice, equity, and inclusion should be embedded in how we approach development of digital public goods. And therefore, we support the gap between social actors and the technical community, and with the principles on building the ecosystem and the innovation, the solutions that are focused around community needs. So community-focused impacts and sustainability metrics is at the core of what we do, especially as it relates to funding for social impact. And therefore, everything that we'll be talking about today about the impact measurement tools really is an enabling infrastructure for impact investments that are centered around community needs. So the 4 areas of works that we do are centered around education, centered around building the research and evidence and insights that informs development of solutions, but also supporting actually the innovation itself. Therefore, we are participating in this hackathon today, and also convening the different stakeholders together for collaboration and impact. So if you are interested in being part of this, please reach out to us. And so now let's talk about why are we actually developing this tool and what is it going to address. So largely, and this is a very quick overview, we face problems in funding for climate, biodiversity, and development. We don't have enough money to achieve impact. The money that we have does not go to the people who need it the most, be it indigenous and local communities or most affected populations. So funding allocation is very inequitable. But also we have a lot of negative impact of development where development is leaving communities worse off and creates negative consequences. So with that in mind, we also need to understand that impact measurement should be at the core of driving the funding. It should be at the core of identifying the initial needs, where the community needs the funding the most, but also to create some accountability measures as to why do we have these negative consequences, why the funding does not reach the communities it needs to reach, and how do we need to realign all the incentives with the community needs. So impact measurements, frameworks, and the tool that we'll be presenting today is really like a GPS that is guiding decisions into financing. So what are some of the problems that we look to address? One is the question of who defines impact. We talk about impact a lot. It almost becomes like a buzzword, right? But who defines impact is incredibly crucial, and how we define it and what do we measure as we talk about impact. So we need to shift away from approaches that are focused on external priorities or project-defined metrics driven by donors or by governments or some interested parties who are developing products or solutions, right? They're specifically focused only on the outcomes that relate to this project, like number of houses built or how many trees we have planted, and really miss the complexity of the environments in which people live. And it should move more towards the community-defined metrics, where the focus on the outcome is as it is defined by local communities that advances the long-term sustainability, which also means social cohesion and ecosystem health, and which reflect the real true needs and values of people. So the second problem that we're also trying to address in this is how do we think about incentives and move away from the incentives that are purely attached to financial capital, or what value, sort of monetary value, can we get through financing a certain initiative, to how do we put community wealth as actually the incentives to funding. So how do we go beyond financial returns, and how do we also understand that by investing into community well-being, we also set all other metrics better off, and how do we create an ecosystem that also respects the community, the different forms of assets that community holds, and puts community well-being and kind of the concept of community well-being at the core of investments. This is the second problem. And the third one, big problem, is also how do we link all of that into the actual impact investment models and innovative financing models. So how do we do this kind of multi-capital accounting and understand that communities have different forms of assets that they hold? So how do we recognize them in the impact frameworks? How do we also think about the cost saved when we invest in certain forms, like the social capital, the cultural capital, environmental capital? We also actually save the costs that reduce strains on the health systems, for example, and build new ecosystem assets. So how do we take this concept of investing into the well-being and multi-capital assets also as a form of impact investment that focuses on well-being? So this kind of three big guiding principles led us also to explore, okay, how do we actually leverage what we have in the ecosystem today already, and all the impact investment approaches, but also approaches to how we think about ecological assets, forest conservation assets, local economies, and how do we build this sort of foundation and the framework that allows us to bridge the work of what is already happening today, the data that we have today, with kind of the broader perspective of connecting this to the community well-being. So there are a lot of projects already happening. What gaps we think remain, that we think that multidimensional approach to impact assessments could address. One is understanding the complexity of the ecosystem for informed decision making. And moving out of this kind of one lens approach more into the understanding of the community's well-being as the center of it, and everything else that might affect it. So also with that, it also comes the question of how do we quantify non-financial forms of capital that are currently very difficult to represent. From having discussed this with multiple partners in the ecosystem, it becomes very, very difficult to measure social and economic impact. It's a long-term impact, but given that we don't really have appropriate tools or frameworks to measure it together with the impact, like ecological impact. So we are also looking to find ways that would allow us to quantify those different forms of capital and link them all together. And the last gap that we also think the multidimensional approach could help us address is the continuity of investments, continuity of initiatives, and scalability through actually resource sharing, collaboration, and identifying areas where certain cost savings can be achieved, redirecting the funding as needed, but also contributing the funding of certain projects as needed. So it's basically an approach that we also hope can give us a different framework to inform our decision making. So to give you a little bit more an idea of how that multidimensional data framework can account for non-financial capital that I spoke a little bit about, like, for example, social or cultural, that is incredibly important when we talk about the, especially the local context, right? So first, we need a very holistic data collection. We need to collect data on different forms of capital communities have. We have a lot of already efforts that are going into understanding the environmental capital. Together with that, we need to build the understanding of the social capital and the cultural capital and bring them all together into a more comprehensive understanding of communities. We also need to keep in mind that these are coming from very different data sources, on-chain and off-chain, collected by communities, nonprofits, governments, that all need to be put together to understand that kind of big picture that define community well-being and success. The second one is find ways really for multi-capital accounting, and how do we actually assign value to that non-financial capital. I already gave some examples that they can be manifested, this capital, like investment in, let's say, social capital or human capital, like health and education, can result in cost savings. And that would provide data-driven insights that also can help stakeholders integrate these capitals into investment decisions for a more comprehensive understanding of how to invest in community well-being. The third one is developing custom impact metrics. So by custom impact metrics, I mean community-led metrics. So those that are relevant for those specific contexts. So once we also have the different data accounted for, so how do we measure health outcomes, cultural preservation, let's say, or environmental sustainability from the perspective of communities? So how can communities set metrics based on their priorities, based on their values and vision of success, beyond the financial metrics of what it is that matters to them? And that can be different in obviously all different contexts. And the fourth one is, how do we continue to collect this data and engage communities and encourage different stakeholders to contribute towards this data collection? Because we realize that we need to build the baseline against which in this multidimensional data framework will be assessing programs and making decisions, but the value of this approach will be only more relevant with the time, because we're talking about long-term sustainability here. And so therefore we need to think about reward mechanisms for communities to continue to contribute to data collection efforts and efforts to capture basically the different forms of capital. So this is kind of the overarching approach that needs to start on data collection, on understanding how do we account for different forms of capital that communities have, and the impact that's kind of the interaction that they have with each other, and what it means for financing. How do we integrate the community-led impact metrics into those decisions, and how we build the reward mechanisms. So how could this unlock funding? I will talk a little bit first about kind of the multidimensional impact dashboards that it would allow us to create this framework, and how that would potentially lead to new innovative models that can unlock new funding streams. So having this framework, multidimensional impact assessment framework in place, would allow us to have an impact dashboard that would focus on several steps. First, identifying non-financial capital. So this is very important, the capital that is currently not captured in our decision-making that is driving the ecosystem investments and work with communities, right? So the social capital already mentions, like, let's say, community relations, or what is the strength of the networks. The cultural capital, what are some of the traditions that are important for the communities? The human capital, what is the access to health and education? And how do we lead investments into these major capitals? So capturing, identifying, and capturing this. Second, this multidimensional impact dashboard would also allow us to bring together quantifiable and qualitative indicators from different sources that would reflect the impact on these dimensions of non-financial capital. So let's say it's a mix of access to health services and self-reported improvements in health, or what is the amount of traditional knowledge that we have documented or preserved, and what is the satisfaction with cultural preservation efforts. So this is that links the different, obviously, sources of data. And as I spoke before, this can also mean having data that is linked from governmental sources to data that is linked from nonprofit or community-led data into kind of one bigger picture. The third step will be then to using a multi-capital scoring system to create that kind of holistic view of non-financial returns that we have from investment to different forms of capital. So what does that mean in practice? It means that we can assign weight to different dimensions based on how communities relate to this. Right, so because we need to build some sort of a well-being index that would be accounted for in investments later. So communities could assign the value to different forms of capital, like, let's say, social capital 20%, environmental capital 40%. So build some sort of a multi-capital scoring system that would inform then the well-being index, being led by communities themselves. The fourth step being community then define the metrics on how they can track capital. So, for example, which is very important, especially in the regenerative finance ecosystem, is that the environmental success is not only measured by how many trees we replant, but also how do we preserve the biodiversity and the presence of, for example, species that are very important for cultural, historical, health preservation or understanding of the communities. So community-defined, setting specific community-defined metrics that are linked to their own value. Then it is also about how do we leverage different data collection tools to continue to collect different aspects to inform this multidimensional impact dashboard. So we already have a lot of mobile apps that are being used by communities on the ground. So how do we combine data from those tools with GPS satellite data? How do we use the multimedia access like records, like, for example, audio recordings or video recordings that communities have, to also add to the data collection and understanding of the different forms of capital. So we need, in this kind of multidimensional impact dashboard, also ability to connect the different data collection tools that we currently have. And finally, being able to then track and understand what the baseline is and track progress against the baseline and link these metrics to investment decisions. So the final part is more, of course, about using this data to develop impact financing models that focus on how social capital, for example, can drive sustainable local economies, or understanding how certain impact agreements can focus on calculating the saved costs by investing into the different assets, and how do we take this into consideration for impact investment. So there can be different innovative models, and this is another discussion and part for kind of another workshop. I think in this part, we are specifically just focusing on building the baseline for the multidimensional impact dashboards that could first start with this foundation of making sure that we collect the different forms of assets and understanding of what is important for communities from the perspective of well-being and accounting for these different assets. And then the second part is linking it to the impact financing strategies. So with this kind of quick overview, I will pass it on to Jordan now to actually talk about how do you enable this and what are some initial basic steps that we need to build a multidimensional framework.
Thank you, Katia. I hope you can hear me right. So as Katia said, the data already exists. We have a different set of tools that already exist and projects, amazing projects, from Gainforest through Carbon to Lukicheva, for example. We have also a huge amounts of data that is available through open data and traditional data sources. She mentioned also that we have people on the ground collecting data, monitoring data around not only ecological data and biodiversity, but also community-focused data. And this comes into several ways, variety of ways. It can be surveys, it can be records, it can be images, text, databases, whatever. But we need the main data already exists, and we need a way to connect the data collection tools and the different ReFi projects in order to be able to have the full vision, this holistic vision of the community well-being, but also about biodiversity and ecosystem well-being. So when we start to ask ourselves how we can connect all this, we start to understand that it's not only the connection part that will be complicated, but or daunting, but also the data harmonization part. So in order to harmonize and to align all these different data sources on the same level, well, we need first a flexible data model in order to adapt and to adjust with the different variety of format, but also of data type. But also we need a common shared unit in order to on top of this to build the different dimensions, ecological, biodiversity, but also centered around community. So we think that as a core unit, what makes sense is localization. Why? Because, well, a community is centered around a specific location. Same in this specific location, we have also natural assets, but we have also biodiversity. So our common unit, our core unit in this model that we are thinking about is what we call adaptive admin units. Adaptive in order to adapt to different administrative local context. Each countries has different way in order to differentiate different administrative units. So the idea is to leverage, to have something flexible enough to adapt to different contexts, geographic context, but in the same time to leverage the existing administrative units in order to integrate to what currently and already exists, in order to leverage also open data and government data. That's the idea of having this as a core unit. And then attached to this, we have a community, which is clearly identified by a population size, primary language, cultural identifiers, and geo-boundaries also, because they are attached to this adaptive admin units. We have also in this location, we have also natural assets. It can be for different type. It can be forest, it can be lake, it can be pots, it can be any kind of natural asset exists in this adaptive admin units. And also we have biodiversity, different species that live in this area. So how all these three elements of interest that we want to monitor the health are interacting with each other. So with this model, we have a full vision on what are the main elements of interest that lives in my unit, and we can clearly see each element of interest has some characteristics that will identify it uniquely. For example, for natural assets, it can be the name, the geographic boundaries, the legal status, or for biodiversity, it can be scientific name of the species, taxonomy, ecosystem role. And these are characteristics to identify them uniquely. But they have also, metrics that are attached to them that will help us to kind of monitor the evolution and also the status of the element of interest. What interests us in the case of the community is not only formal metrics, for example, related to population, gender ratio, poverty rate, but also community-defined metrics, for example, access to healthcare facilities, to school facilities, having access to qualitative and nutritive food. These are the kind of metrics that are of interest of the community, but it's also good to be able to monitor them because they are community-defined. So that's the idea on how we can kind of link all together all these different data on the same scale. Here, for example, the scale is at the city level, but the idea is to have such a model that can scale through different levels. It can be from neighborhood to regional level, for example. This being said, let's go over the challenge of this hackathon, what we are asking you and what we are expecting from you. So the idea is to be able to build this multi-dimensional record for a specific chosen administrative unit. So we will provide you with some data sources. The idea is to be able to first find the unit, so the adaptive admin units you want to focus on, because this is the core of the model. And then once you have defined your unit you want to focus on, so it's a geographical unit, then you will identify the different elements of interest that are inside this unit. So the idea is to be able to go to and to source yourself across the different existing data sources. It can come from the different Web3 and Refi projects that we have mentioned previously, from Gainforest to Restore, etc. And to link it with data sources from local population and indigenous communities that monitor their community metrics. It can come from, for example, IndyMap, that gives you more information about the repartition of different indigenous communities in Latin America, for example. And you will have also access to sources that will track access to school facilities, water quality, air quality, and other community-oriented data. So the idea is to be able to connect all these different data sources and to build tools to query this data or to extract this data and to align them around the same core unit, administrative unit. So if you click here, you will find a JSON that will give you more understanding and an example of what we are expecting as a multi-dimensional record. All right. We are asking you also to submit, to enable for any community members to submit a community-defined metric. What do we mean by this? If for what we previously said, we have formal metrics, but we want also for each different communities that live under different units, geographical units, to be able to say, okay, what is our metrics of interest? How do we want to define our well-being? And so we need a process of submission form for them to be able to express this. And so we will need a kind of submission mechanism. It can be off-chain or on-chain. it's up to you. But we, at some point, any community member will be able to submit a community metrics, and some kind of authority or role will be able to decide if we include them as a metric to monitor or not. So how do we, this leads us to, this is the core deliverable, sorry. And as a bonus, we propose you to focus also on how to implement leveraging protocols, existing protocols, a proof of location, because we want to give more weight to actual people living under a specific administrative unit. So we need to leverage on kind of proof of location. So there are some protocols available. We will see them also later on, and also develop some smart contracts logic in order to verify membership based on this proof of location, but also data encryption and data access control, which are very crucial, because what we are talking here is to enable community to define their well-being and define metrics of interest for them, but also to incentivize them and to enable them to collect this data. But these data belong to them, and we are and they should be able to control who has access to this data, and also monetize it if it's possible. So the data encryption comes here in order to protect this data and give, and only the people that will have the right to access to it or the correct role will be able to decrypt the data. So that's how all these different elements are linked, and also enable data monetization for in order to incentivize the community. Okay, so how to get started? First, we have gathered some data sources. So we invite you to explore these different data sources that covers ecological biodiversity, but also community-oriented and data. So we have Restore, Nggmap, and Indigenous Navigator. We have also put some documentation if you want to learn more about how to handle geospatial data. So feel free to explore them. And on the other side, we have you can leverage. We have listed a set of toolbox that you can leverage. So it's composed of protocols. You can leverage, for example, a short protocol for to build location-based app. And understand how to link location and all different kind of data. This is crucial because, as we discussed, our core unit is based on geographical boundaries, so you will at some point need to work with that. We also add lead protocols that will help you to encrypt and decrypt the data, and also the graphs that will help you to kind of be able to monitor the different events happening inside your smart contracts, and put it into a more formal database in order to be able to query them faster. We have also provide you with some available tools. Scaffold, which is a toolkit, a very, very convenient and useful toolkit if you don't want to spend too much time, hours, in, for example, fixing bug in how to connect to your wallet. This will handle main functionality of a DApp for you, so in order to kind of bootstrap and to fasten your the development of your DApp. We have also Remix to quickly test and prototype your smart contracts. And last but not least, Filecoin for decentralized storage, or you can also leverage other decentralized storage solutions like Arweave. And we have put there some concept also that you explore in order to build this solution. You can explore Ethereum attestations, NFT, smart contract registry, event token gated approach. It's up to you. So feel free to explore this concept and reach out to us if you have any questions regarding the text aspect, or even understanding better this framework. Okay, and we have also put an annex.
Just one second, sorry, we have 2 minutes left on the recording, so I just want to make sure you can finish wrapping up. But
okay,
I will say that
we can skip the annex. You can just have a look, and it will give more understanding about all this data process and how to encrypt, decrypt, etc. But I think, yeah, feel free, Katia, to.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for this amazing overview. So we just want to say we will leave all the links to the documentation and where you can engage us during this hackathon in the presentation that we're also sharing in this recording. We are part of the Telegram channel and also on Discord at Funding the Commons Hackathon. So you can reach out to us there. You can also reach us directly on social media through LinkedIn. Yeah, and so we are very interested in hearing your proposals, but also more broadly just joining the community of those who are thinking about impact in a way that is centered around communities, and also inviting others to join in exploring this approach. So thank you, and yes, check out all the links in the presentation, and we hope to be in touch. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.